News Radio 700 WLW.
Back with Eddie and Rocky. And Rocky, it seems like every day, man, there's an ad or there's packaging misleading.
All the
Right.
time. I
Come on
mean,
now.
especially fast food. It was funny. Just the other day, there was an Arby's commercial come on, and it shows, the beef and cheddar, and it's got, 4 inches
hell yeah.
of roast
You
beef
can't get
on
your
it.
mouth around the damn
And
thing.
even my son, who's 10, goes, "What is that?" He goes, "Those sandwiches never look like that." I was like, "Well, son, welcome to the world of misleading
Right.
advertising." And apparently that's happened to another restaurant that other people know, and I believe it's gone to court.
There's a new lawsuit accusing Subway of, quote, grossly misleading customers by advertising sandwiches that contain at least 3 times as much meat as it delivers.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's not even close. And here to discuss with us is our good friend John Rizvi, the patent professor. And John, how this is so common. We've had the who was it that got sued for? I think it was B-Dubs that got sued because their boneless wings aren't really wings, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, how common is this stuff, John?
Yeah, it's incredibly common, and it's becoming more and more common with time. This latest lawsuit with Subway reminds me of the 1984 Wendy's "Where's the Beef" commercials, because
Right.
that's essentially the claim, is that, hey, the advertising makes us think we're getting, this, and then by the time the actual food arrives, it looks nothing like the poster. The real question in all of these cases becomes, what does the reasonable consumer think? Like, when does puffery in advertising or exaggeration go too far? We've all seen the ads about world's best pizza, and you understand that to be puffery. But when something goes beyond that and says boneless chicken wings, and should consumers expect the meat to be wing meat just because it's boneless? Those are where the tough questions come in. Subway successfully Subway as well. I mean, they were sued for their foot-long sub sandwiches because the sandwiches were actually 11 inches in length.
I remember that too.
They weren't a foot long. Now, in that case, it was considered not to be puffery, that the reasonable consumer, when they hear the term foot long, they expect it to be 12 inches of sandwich. And Subway, in settlement, was forced to require all of their sandwiches are actually measured to make sure they're 12 inches now. So sometimes these lawsuits do result in changes that are good for consumers. Most of the time, unfortunately, I think they're frivolous and they end up being dismissed.
Right.
And this one, I guess my question would be, when you look at the picture of something, pictures can always be misleading. How something is angled, how this and that, and how can someone prove that, hey, that sandwich in the ad has a lot more meat on it than it does in my sandwich? You know what I mean? I mean, you can see it with your eyes, but I would think the restaurant could come back and say, well, all it is that we're kind of looking at it from the bottom, and how do you know that there's not, there's more meat on the sandwich, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, in the Subway case, they're actually using relative size, and they're saying in the picture, it looks like at least as much meat as bread. So whatever the thickness of the bread is on top and on bottom, we expected at least that much meat in the sandwich. So they don't have, you can't look at a picture and say, hey, this should be 6 ounces of salami or whatever. But it's clearly not equivalent. I mean, it's clearly less than what you end up getting, less than what the picture shows. The question is, should consumers expect a certain amount of puffery in advertising? Should they expect, we've all seen the commercials with food, and there's like steam coming out from, how hot the pizza is. Like, that's, if it's not the case, and you say, oh, I expected this to be so hot that there's steam coming from the food, well, that's not realistic. But when it does come to safety, then the courts seem to pay more attention. So there's 2 cases regarding the boneless chicken wings. One was, the lawsuit was based on, hey, I thought this was wing meat, and wing meat is more expensive than other meat from a chicken, breast or thigh meat. and therefore I've suffered damages because I got less value. Those are not given as much importance. But there's another case where a consumer purchased what they thought were boneless chicken wings, and it had a stray bone, and they actually tore their esophagus and had medical costs and injury. In that case, the court said, well, you know what? Like, this is not a matter of, hey, I didn't get as much beef on my sandwich as I thought I was going to get. This is a case, it's a little more sympathetic, where somebody was injured because they relied on it, on something. Starbucks has had several, multiple lawsuits for flavors of their drinks, where consumers are claiming that they thought it was an actual fruit, and it's not real fruit. Just because something says strawberry or chocolate doesn't mean it actually contains real strawberries or real chocolate.
And we're talking to John Rizvi, the patent professor. And John, whatever happened to the lawsuit we're talking about Subway a few years back, where the woman was claiming that their tuna salad didn't have tuna in it? I don't think I ever got the facts on that straight.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. I mean, in that case, my sympathy is with Subway, because the lawsuit ended up being dismissed. Subway was able to prove that their subs do contain real tuna. But the reason, my sympathy is with them, the damage to the restaurant chain's reputation, right? People years later, they may not remember or follow up what exactly happened with that case, just like you don't. But everybody remembers that there's some issue with Subway and whether their tuna is real, and that's not the case. The case was dismissed. I don't know what happened regarding sanctions, but Subway actually countersued in that case, seeking damages, saying, not only does our tuna sub have real tuna, but you have cost us a lot of damages in terms of lost reputation, and they tried to show, I'm sure, lost sales from people who are not buying their tuna subs from Subway, believing that there's no real tuna in it, and that ended up being a false accusation.
John, you talked earlier about, the foot long and how it wasn't actually a foot long. Do you know any other examples of portion sizes being kind of tweaked a little bit in the favor of a restaurant, where you think you're getting 12 ounces, but really it's 11, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a clear case where the restaurant actually stated a portion size. Most of the time, most of these cases are based on pictures, right? It's not that they say. It's a lot easier to hold a restaurant accountable if Subway were to say 8 ounces of salami in their advertising, then it's a much stronger case than if they just show what clearly looks. If you look at the pictures that I did out of curiosity, you go and look back, and there's no doubt that there's way more meat in their pictured sandwiches than you're going to get. But is that what consumers are expecting? And if it's an expectation and consumers know about it and it's puffery, courts are less likely to say, hey, we're going to hold you to that. But when a chain specifically states something, then it's no longer left up to consumers guessing. They have a right to rely on on the restaurant's statement. Now, Subway tried to argue that footlong was just a fanciful term and it's a trademark and it's not really intended to mean that it's a footlong. And the court didn't agree with that. They said this is different than somebody saying world's best or world's fastest or whatever. This is a specific claim, and most people who purchase a footlong assume that they're getting a foot of sandwich and not 11 inches of sandwich. Well, thanks to that lawsuit, now the foot long is a foot long. And maybe they counter. It's a foot long, but they cut back on the meat, right?
Right. So, yeah.
Okay, you get a little more bread. Congrats.
Yeah.
So there you go. You get a foot long of bread in your sandwich.
Right, and the bread is what makes everyone fat, so it's a lose-lose. Now I got a lawsuit, John, that everyone can get behind. And being that it's Halloween, everyone knows what I'm talking about. The size of the Halloween candy has gotten smaller and smaller, and I think something should be done about it.
That's right. Especially if you picture something, like I can just see some poor homeowner. They put pictures of the candy, and the actual candy ends up being less, and saying, "Hey, I walked half a block to get to that house."
Yeah, the
and,
Johnsons promised Snickers bars, and they're the mini size.
The day a kid pulls out a picture and goes, "This is bullcrap." The Jones down the street are giving out half-size bars. But also, in kind of that regard, John, we're talking to John Rizvi, the patent professor. I don't know if any lawsuits have been filed on this, but more and more people, I do, I know my wife does, and Mike, I've heard you do it too, bitching about, say, potato chips. You get a bag of chips, I don't care if it's Doritos, Fritos, potato chips, whatnot. It's a big old bag, and you pop that sucker open, and it might be 2/3 of the way full.
Well, and it's an interesting, I guess, but patent attorneys find things interesting that nobody else does. So I say this with hesitation, but you read the labels, and it's funny sometimes. You'll read, contents may settle during shipping or whatever. Like, they put all these things on to say, hey, you should know. In 2014, this is old news now, it's about 10 years ago, the Nissan was sued because their Nissan Frontier was shown pushing a dune buggy up a hill, and consumers claimed that it's false advertising. The vehicle is not really capable of doing that. In that case, they ended up changing their advertising, and that's why you'll see a lot of thing, professional driver, and you'll say, closed course, don't try this at home, or not actual vehicle, because when they see these car commercials, the things the cars do, they want to make sure consumers don't have this false impression that the vehicle can actually do that. So this is, it's kind of a balance between the companies putting warnings on to avoid lawsuits and to avoid false advertising claims, and some people saying they've gone too far because the warnings almost seem ridiculous, because it should be common sense, right? The classic, sunshade that says, do not drive with the windshield sunshade in place. Like, is that really necessary? Unfortunately, it is.
Well, it must be, because some idiot tried.
Someone tried and realized that, to their detriment, that you're not supposed to drive with it in place. So is why we have this proliferation of warnings, which is a problem in itself, because when you get too many of them, then people end up not reading them and not paying attention.
Exactly. With that, John Rizvi, we will let you go. People want to find out more about what it is you do. Where can they go?
Yeah, so our trademark is the Patent Professor. So anywhere on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, just type in the Patent Professor. You'll find us. The website, thepatentprofessor.com.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks, John.